Today I'm making a really easy bread machine recipe. This is a soft and fluffy bread machine bread that has an unexpected surprise ingredient. Let's get started on our oatmeal jelly bread. Now normally when I share a bread machine recipe, I'll use my Zojirushi bread machine that's back there, but today I have something else going in it. So I pulled out my old trusty bread machine that I have had for years and years and years. This thing has made thousands of loaves of bread for me. So this is my plug for a thrift store bread machine. This thing is from a thrift store. It still has the sticker on it. I wish I could read it. I probably paid $5 or $10 for it. And this was years ago, so maybe it was even cheaper. But if you want a really nice bread machine, that Zojirushi back there is the best I've ever used, but this is a close second. And for the price difference, go to the thrift store, get yourself a good bread machine, start using it, and if you use it a lot, then you can upgrade to the good one. But I love this bread machine. So today it's my backup and I'm gonna get this loaf of bread going in it. So to get started, I want 1.5 cups of warm water. You want it to be about 100 to 110 degrees. That'll help your yeast to activate. So I'm just gonna put it right on into my bread machine loaf pan. And next I want 2 tablespoons of melted butter. This is a really cool Lodge cast iron melting pot. I love this. My husband got this for me because I was always melting my butter in the microwave and it would splatter and pop and make huge messes. And now I have this thing and you just put it on the stovetop and you melt your butter and it just takes a second. So it's awesome. So for this recipe, I want 2 tablespoons of melted butter. Now, if you want to use oil instead, you can use 2 tablespoons of any kind of oil that you want. Okay, so 2 tablespoons of melted butter is what I'm using. Next, we want some flour. I want 3 cups of flour. Now, you can use bread flour or you can use all-purpose flour. Either one is fine. Today, I'm using all-purpose flour just because I buy my flour in bulk and I have a ton of all-purpose flour to use up. I really prefer to use bread flour, so I kind of went through that first, but now I have some all-purpose flour I need to use. And then this is gonna turn out great with bread flour or all-purpose flour. So I want 3 cups of all-purpose flour. I'm gonna put it right into my bread machine loaf pan. Now with bread flour, you'll get a little bit better rise, a little bit different texture because it has a higher protein content, but all-purpose flour, that's mainly what people have. So if you have all-purpose flour, use that. That'll work great. And our next ingredient is whole wheat flour. You want 1/2 cup of whole wheat flour, but don't worry, if you don't have any whole wheat flour, you can definitely just add another 1/2 cup of bread flour or all-purpose flour. But I went ahead, I got out my Nutri-Mill wheat grinder back there and my hard white winter wheat berries, and I ground up a little bit of flour for this recipe. So this is 1/2 cup of whole wheat flour. Just put that right on in there. Next, we want some oats or some oatmeal. I'm gonna use 1/2 cup of these quick oats. These are from Augustin Farms. They have really great quick oats and you can buy them in bulk. It's great for breakfast or storing in your food storage or for making bread. That's what I mainly do. So I want 1/2 cup of quick oats. Just put it right on in there. You can tell this is a really good hearty loaf of bread. Now our next ingredient is the surprise ingredient. This is gonna sound a little weird, a little strange, but I'm telling you it works. I'm gonna use some jelly in this bread recipe. Now, this jelly works because it takes the place of any other sweeteners that you might use. This takes the place of sugar or honey or maple syrup. So this works great. And it might sound weird, but it really does work. So for this recipe, we want 2 heaping tablespoons of jelly. Now, all I have is this grape jelly, which is gonna be a little bit bright in this bread. This recipe really calls for apple jelly or apricot jelly. This recipe was sent to me by Dennis and Loretta, and they use their own crabapple jelly and plum jelly that they make. So they like this recipe enough to send it to me, and thank you so much for sending me this recipe because it's so cool. I love this recipe. This is kind of a cool, no food waste type recipe because you use what you have. If you have some jelly in your refrigerator that needs to get used up, whether it's grape or strawberry, or maybe better would be apricot or apple. Those would probably work a little bit better just because of the color, but I think they're all gonna work just fine. So I like this recipe because it helps us to use up what we have in our refrigerator. And that is the beauty of homemade food. you get to put whatever you want into your bread. And so I love this recipe. This is a great one. Thank you, Dennis and Loretta. Okay, next we want some salt. This is my Redmond's Real Salt. I've been baking with this the last year and I really like this salt. It is a North American ancient fine sea salt. It comes out of Utah, which is really cool because I didn't know that we could get ancient sea salt out of anywhere in the United States. So this is cool. Now for this recipe, we want 1.5 teaspoons of salt. So I'm gonna measure it over here. Definitely don't wanna measure your salt over your bread machine pan because you might over pour it and then your whole bread will be totally ruined. So don't do that. So 1.5 teaspoons, just put it right on in there. This is a really pretty pink salt, so it's really neat. And our last ingredient is yeast. This is my Red Star Active Dry Yeast. I really like this yeast. I've been using it for years. I like to buy it in bulk. This is a 2-pound container of it. And I just stored it in my freezer and it lasts forever. It lasts for years and years and years past the expiration date that way. So this is the cheapest way to buy it if you buy it in bulk. I really like this yeast, but you can also use instant yeast or you can use bread machine yeast. So just substitute out the same amount. So for this recipe, we want 1.5 teaspoons of yeast. Okay, and I'm just gonna throw that right on in there. If you want to, you can make a little well in your flour and put it in there like that if you learn that way. But for me, I used to always do that, and now I know that it doesn't make a difference because I'm about to put this into my bread machine and get it all mixing right now. Okay, so those are all of our ingredients. It's time to throw this into the bread machine. Now, I'm gonna let my bread machine do all the work today. I'm gonna let it mix it up, knead it, let it rise, and bake it all in the bread machine. Now, Dennis and Loretta, they like this best when they use the dough cycle of the bread machine, take it out and bake it in the oven. I do that all the time too. If you wanna know how to use your dough cycle of your bread machine, I'll link a video where I tell you how to do that because it's great. I love my bread baked in the oven, even better than in the bread machine. But I have a busy day today and I am gonna just let the bread machine do all the work for this bread. And it turns out fantastic in the bread machine. Okay, so I'm gonna just pop this in there. And for this bread, I'm gonna choose a basic 2-pound cycle and I'm gonna do my crust control. I always like light crust, so that's what I'm going for, and I'm gonna press start. Now, down in the description, I will leave a recipe for a 2-pound loaf, a 1.5-pound loaf, and a 1-pound loaf, in case you have different size bread machines. But today I'm making a 2-pound loaf. Now, this is gonna take about 3 hours. Now, this is the very most important part of using a bread machine. In just a few minutes, after it's kneaded up just for a little bit, I'm gonna check on my ball of dough. If it's too wet or too dry, then my bread is not gonna turn out well. So it just takes a minute. If I need to add a little bit of flour, I'll know at that point. If I need to add a little bit of water, I'll know at that point too. So in just a few minutes, I will show you this ball of dough so that you know exactly what yours should look like. Now my bread machine's been going for about 8 minutes, so I'm checking on my ball of dough and it looks really good. I always like to come in with a rubber spatula and kind of get any of the little bit of extra flour or anything that's stuck in the corners into the ball of dough. This one's looking really good, but if your bread machine has some flour stuck to the sides, be sure that you use a rubber spatula and get it all off. If not, when your bread is done baking, you might have flour stuck to the side of your baked bread and it is not gonna taste good or look pretty. But this ball of dough looks great. It doesn't look too wet. It's tacky, but not sticky. It's not sticking to the sides or the bottom. If yours is sticking to the sides or the bottom, add about another 1/8 of a cup of flour. Give it a few minutes to mix. If it's still too sticky, add a little bit more. Or if it's not coming together into a nice smooth ball of dough like this, then add about a tablespoon of water. Give it a few minutes, make sure it all gets mixed in really well, and then reassess. But this is what you want your ball of dough to look like. Now I can confidently shut the door of my bread machine, and in about 2 hours and 45 minutes, this bread is gonna be ready. Our easy bread machine bread is ready. Check out our oatmeal jelly bread. It's fresh from the bread machine and it looks so good. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it out of the loaf pan. I always like to get mine out right away when it's done baking in the bread machine. If I'm home, if I'm not, then it can just sit in there, but I like it better when I do get it out. Look how good it looks. This is a light crust. That's just how I like my bread machine bread. But if you like yours a little bit darker, go ahead and set it to medium or dark. I have my little melting pot here with some melted butter, and I just like to brush the crust of my fresh bread with the melted butter. This just makes it so good. This will give you a really soft crust. It'll give you that nice buttery flavor, and it gives you the really pretty shine, which I love. All right, this is what I like to do. I have been smelling this bread all day, and it smells so good, but to get the very best texture and crumb out of your bread, you should let it cool for a little bit. So I like to cover up my fresh loaf of bread with a tea towel. This warmth and condensation will give you really nice soft crust. But if you'd rather put it on a cooling rack, do that. But I'm just gonna let this sit here just for a few minutes because it is really hot, and then I'm gonna cut into it. I have been smelling this yummy bread baking for a few hours. It smells incredible, and I am ready to cut into it and check out the inside. Now, like I said, for the best crumb texture, you want to let your bread cool, but I cannot do that. After making fresh homemade bread, I've got to eat it warm. Oh my goodness, look at that. You would never know that there is purple grape jelly in this bread. It doesn't look purple at all. It looks absolutely perfect. Look at that. What a pretty, nice, soft loaf of bread. It is so soft. It is just gonna be so good for sandwiches. Cut into it a little bit more. Oh my goodness, look at this. It is so soft and fluffy. Oh, this looks absolutely incredible. Okay, I'm gonna take a little bite of the heel. That's my favorite part. I'm gonna take a little bite and let you know how it tastes. It tastes amazing. If I didn't make this bread myself, I would have no clue that there's jelly in this bread, especially grape jelly. There is no hint of the taste from the grape jelly at all. You really can't see the color at all either. So if you want to have a little bit of fun and make some of this oatmeal jelly bread, I'm going to leave the recipe down in the description. Print it out, try out this recipe, make it. Let me know if you like it. This is also a great recipe to try using the dough cycle of your bread machine and then baking it in the oven. So I'll link that and put the instructions for that too. Thank you so much for being here with me on Robyn on the Farm. I will see you next time.
Robyn's in the kitchen, dough beneath her hands, wheat from the fields and eggs from her land. Sunlight through the window, a warm golden glow. She's working hard to make that dough. With flour on her apron, loving each need,